Okay, I think we can begin. What I'm doing here tonight is a continuation of a series that we began several weeks ago, dealing with the essentials of interpersonal relationships. The first part of this series deals with the relationships between husband and wife, men and women. We've spoken about the various roles that men and women have, how different they are, the importance of marriage, the uniqueness of the partner that we call ben zug or bat zug, that individual who's the best match for us. We spoke about how to go about finding where he or she is, what to do if we've passed the age of 30, 35, and we still haven't found her, and we're wondering where is he or she hiding. What are the segulot, tefillot, and bakashot that we could say, what can we do to merit to find him or her? We spoke about the various markivim, the components that help preserve a marriage, what areas of friction to avoid. And in the past 3 weeks, I gave several lectures on astrology, believe it or not, because there's a certain part of astrology that most people are unaware of that deals with the personality and characteristics that every individual is endowed with. And by having a better understanding of those characteristics that every individual has by virtue of the fact that he is born in a certain month and hour, it helps us understand him or her. It helps us realize that we all have weaknesses, and perhaps by knowing what those weaknesses are before we get married, or even once we're married, we're able to give the benefit of the doubt and perhaps help him or her with those weaknesses. We've come to the 10th and last session dealing with marriage and relationships between husband and wives. And this is the most difficult one. This one deals with what happens if things have gotten out of hand, things have deteriorated. Is the situation beyond repair? Is it still salvageable? Do we go ahead with divorce, or do we try to save the marriage? I think it was about a week ago I noticed an article, perhaps most of you overlooked it, that the year 2002 was one of the safest years in aviation history. There haven't been too many plane crashes. What does that mean? That obviously there was good maintenance to the planes. There haven't been any major problems, any defects with the wings, with the engines. But what does happen when a plane falls from the sky? What is the immediate response from the aviation authorities? Is to investigate. And when they finish their investigation, if they're lucky, they can discover that something went wrong with the wing or with some other part of the plane, and hopefully they fix it. They make sure it does not happen with future models. This would be the right approach. If there would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 planes falling off the sky, you try to determine what the cause of the crash is by inspecting the plane. But what happens if 50% of all the planes begin crashing down? It wouldn't make sense to blame this part or that part. What should they do instead is go to the plant where the planes are being assembled, check the blueprints, check the engineers. There's obviously something wrong at the very early stage. The planes are not being built properly. The same is true with marriage. If 1, 2, 3, 4 marriages would fall apart, it would be possible to blame him or her, that there's something wrong with them. But when we have an average of 50% of failed marriages, of divorces in some parts of the world, it tells us that we should not blame him or her. We should blame the whole system. Something is not right. Something is wrong. Why aren't things working out the way they did hundreds of years ago? So it does not pay to blame him or her that he or her did something not right. If it's happening every other day all over the world, there's something wrong with the system. Many of you have heard the saying about a particular subject, that this subject is not a science but an art, right? It's an art but not a science. Well, let me tell you something. Marriage is both a science and an art. And the reason I say so is because there are rules in marriage. It's a science. There are some do's and some don'ts. And they're very clear, and they've always been true, and they continue to be true. And it is an art because there are situations that are unique because of the circumstances, Every relationship is different, and it does require some creativity. So it is both an art and a science. If there's one piece of advice that I can give you tonight that I'd like you to all go home with, is that it's a good idea for one to learn the rules. Before marriage, ideally, but even after one is married, there are certain rules that if one learns about them, his chances for success are greater. It is not a good idea to start imagining of how this marriage can be a bliss. Because without following the rules, even a marriage that initially was a good marriage can fall apart. What's the most important rule in saving a marriage? There are many rules, but what's the most important one? If I had to choose one, I will choose the following one. There's a story in the Gemara, the rabbis relate to us that there was an individual who wanted to convert. And he approached Shammai. And he asked Shammai, convert me on condition that you can teach me the Torah standing on one foot. He wanted to know the entire Torah. He wanted to know his obligations in 2 minutes. How long can you stand on one foot? And Shammai just said, get out of here. You're not serious. He didn't want to deal with them. He went over to Hillel, who was known to be tolerant and patient, even with those individuals who are very difficult. And he made the same request to Hillel. And Hillel says, yes, I will teach you the entire Torah standing on one foot. What you don't want others to do to you, don't do unto others. In 21st century English, we could say a little bit differently. The way you want to be respected, that is the way you should respect others. What you expect from others, that is what you should do to others. What a husband expects from his wife, that is what he should be willing to do for his wife. Whatever a woman expects from her husband, that is what she should be willing to do for her husband. The two-way street, an important rule, but that's only the basics. What did Hillel tell him after that? Ve'ida zil ugmor. That is the foundation of kol haTorah kula. Ve'ahavta l're'acha kamocha. Ve'ida, but there's more. Zil ugmor. The rest you have to learn. Since there's so much to learn, I've come to the conclusion, and so have others who deal with relationships, that the majority of marriages that are suffering, it's not as a result of that one is bad. The one that there's some raw lead here, there's some bad feelings. It's mostly because of ignorance, choser yeda. Because of that, I strongly believe that the majority of marriages that are falling apart can be salvaged if the two were to learn, were to go to classes, listen to tapes, to lectures such as these. Because without that knowledge, the chances for failure are greater. So what is wrong today? Anybody want to suggest what's going on today? Why are there so many divorces? Anybody have any ideas? I'm sure there's more than one idea, more than one suggestion. What has happened? Impatience. People are selfish, but why are people selfish? Yeah. There are obviously many reasons, but I want to cover the most important one. Most people today have forgotten what the true goal of marriage is. How important the Brit HaNesuim, the covenant. When the groom gave his wife, the Kala, that ring underneath the chuppah, what was he trying to say? That was not just a ceremony. That was not just symbolic. That ring, placing of the ring on the finger, is very important. It means you are mine. And you are mine hopefully forever. In Judaism, the Kiddushin comes from the word Kadosh. They're holy. Life is holy. Life is precious. And this life that we're both embarking on, hopefully we will do it together. It is therefore the act of giving over the ring is a very solemn act, a very serious act. What about the rest of the world then? Marriage is not serious? Not necessarily. In many cultures, there's something called romance. Now what's the problem with romance? There should be some romance in every marriage. There should be passion. But that's not the most important part of the marriage. Because if one places an emphasis on romance, let me tell you what will happen. Number one, when you're dealing with romance, I'm not talking about love now, I'll talk about love later, what love is. Romance means something completely different. If one places an emphasis on being romantic, there's a chance that there will be many on the outside that will compete with your wife. Let's say you like your wife for 10, 15 years, and now she's turned 40, and you see somebody younger than her, whether it's in the street, whether it's in the movies. If the marriage is based on romance, there will be much competition. And when one watches television, one goes to movies, he's stirring up his imagination. Oh, I can get somebody that looks better, that's more attractive, that's younger. And that is why many movie stars marry 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, but they're always divorcing. They always want to get into a romantic relationship, thinking that they will do better with someone younger, someone nicer. And the same is true with women when they see a man. And when their imagination is stirred up, the same thing happens. Why did the marriage of Adam and Chava succeed? Anybody know? Adam and Chava succeeded, some say, because there was no mother-in-law. Others explain it's very simple. There was no competition. He was the only man, and she was the only woman. There's nobody to compare to. That is why the rabbis put a tremendous emphasis in reminding us how a man has to be so careful with what his eyes see. How all the gdarim usyagim, all the fences that the rabbis erected to maintain distance, as was mentioned earlier with Yehud, with going out for lunch with your secretary. These things happen today in the non-Jewish world, and the Jews sometimes assimilate and have a coffee together. There's nothing wrong with that. That is what some people think. And they wear a kippah, and they keep Shabbat, and they keep kosher, but they're breaking the rules. There are rules for distance. There are certain controls that have to be in place, otherwise we are all human and we all fall. So unfortunately, some of the Jewish marriages are falling apart because of assimilation. We learn from the non-Jewish world. We are tempted, our imaginations are steered by what we see in the street and on TV and in the movies. But why does a romantic relationship really dissipate? The reason why it dissipates is because the rabbis tell us that there are two kinds of love. One is called ahava shetluya bedavar, and one is called ahava she'ena tluya bedavar. Ahava shetluya bedavar is a love or a very strong intimate connection that is dependent on something physical. Once that physical thing disappears, the love is gone too. If somebody married a girl because of her money, and now she has no more money, he may drop her. If he married her only because of her beauty and she's no longer beautiful, as far as he claims, he may drop her. If there was ahava shetluya bedavar, it was because of something physical. If that something physical goes away, so will that love, so will that connection. Anything that's physical, the rabbis tell us, dissipates with time, just like any other physical material. It rubs off, and it's gone with time. Besides that, physical things, one can compete with them. But third and most importantly, when we're talking about physical love, what do we really mean? When somebody says that he loves someone, that he likes someone, it could possibly be that he wants someone. The best example is Eshet Potifera with Yosef. Did she love him, or did she like him, or want him? What was it? If she really loved him, why did she throw him in jail? After he resisted, he refused. She didn't love him. She wanted him. She desired him. Anything that is talui bedavar, if it's physical, it dissipates over time. It loses its strength. And because it's not something you really love, that you can connect with. It's something that you desire. And after a while, you may get sick and tired of it. What about the ahava she'ena tluya bedavar? If it's a love which is not based on anything, then it's a spiritual love. What is a spiritual love? If we can describe it in one word, spiritual love means echpatiyut in Hebrew. I care for someone. I'm concerned for someone. And even though you may have heard that it's true, that by giving and giving and giving you eventually love, it is possible to be very concerned for the welfare of someone and to want to give to him. So you can love someone, and as a result of that love, be willing to give and to sacrifice for him or her. So they're both true. Obviously, the Torah puts more of an emphasis, and I'll talk about that a little later, on giving first and allowing the love to grow. But it is possible for some individuals who are very concerned about others, who are willing to sacrifice. That is their nature. And there are certain signs, astrological signs, that by nature are very compassionate, loving, and nurturing, willing to give of themselves. And you know what? People take advantage of their good heart. But because they are endowed with these inclinations, it is easy for them to give of themselves, to walk 10 miles if they had to, for those they cared for. They're willing to give to those who they care, who they are concerned for. So true spiritual love means to be concerned about he or she that you love. In Israel, there are many girls who come home and tell their mothers that they have found their love. And the mother asks them, how do you know, my daughter, that he loves you? Umeshuga alai. He's crazy about me. What a weird expression. He's crazy about you? He must be crazy. There's no such a thing as being crazy about someone. It can only be pure tava, pure lust. You're attracted, perhaps, as was mentioned earlier. The love will come with time. You could be concerned for someone, you can really like and respect someone, but to be crazy, be careful when somebody says he's crazy about you. So since the goal in Judaism, the goal of marriage, is to reach something called ahava shelo tluya b'davar, a spiritual love, not a physical love, the Torah gave us the kelim, the tools to do so. Many of the mitzvot in the Torah we don't understand. But the common denominator of the majority of the mitzvot is to give us the kohot hanefesh. We need a certain amount of strength to be able to deal with the many issues in life, the many problems, relationships. And through the mitzvot, by way of the mitzvot, a human being is able to become a giver instead of a taker. And that is why the Torah emphasizes several times when it comes to tzedakah, naton titen, patoach tiftach tedecha. Open up your hand, give and give and give. It is by way of the mitzvot that the Torah is giving us the kelim to reach a spiritual life. It is only by way of these mitzvot and by practicing what the Torah expects of us that one is able to work on his midot, that one is able to control his temper, that one is able to restrain himself. That is what the Torah does for the human being. It's not that Hashem wants of us certain mitzvot. He doesn't need anything of us. It is for our benefit to elevate us, to become givers instead of takers. The rabbis tell us that anyone who is lacking be'ahavat re'im, who does not have a true friend, who cannot acquire himself one friend where he can give his most unselfishly, as chaser lo be'ahavat Hashem. He can never attain the love for God if you cannot attain a lower level called ahavat re'ah, having a true friend. And what I mean by having a true friend is giving of yourself completely to one or more individuals, being unselfish. If one is not able to have one friend where he can give of himself, how will he ever be a good husband or a good father? Or how can he ever reach the higher, more lofty level of the Haftat Hashem Elokecha? Here is someone that you see with your eyes, and there is someone that you do not see. It's much more difficult to love what you do not see. So the very first step in building up that Ahavat Hashem is Knele Chaver, acquire a friend. The Torah therefore tells us when one gets married, V'dabak v'ishto, that you should be one unit. On the most superficial level of marriage is a bond. It's a friendship. And if Chaz v'Shalom one does not do well in marriage, if one fails, then how is he doing with his relationship with Hashem? It can be at times, depending, there are all sorts of situations, but it can be a mirror image of one's relationship with Hashem. how one behaves towards his spouse. According to the Kabbalah and the Zohar, the true soulmates are part of the same soul. And as you know, the soul is spiritual in nature. It is the combined forces of these two spiritual entities that together they help each other in reaching great heights that they would never be able to attain on their own. So the ultimate goal of marriage, according to Judaism, according to the Torah, is combining the forces. And by doing so, one is able to elevate each other and grow and come closer to Hashem. Many people have all sorts of priorities. A career, a house in Palm Springs, perhaps, for those who live in Southern California. Priorities, things that are important to them. Let's not forget that Judaism places a tremendous emphasis in marriage and considers marriage the top priority of all. As I've said in the previous sessions, one who's not doing well at work, who's miserable because he has a terrible boss, does not have too many friends, barely makes ends meet, he's not healthy, but he has a beautiful marriage, he has everything. If one is prospering, he has money, he has 3 cars, 2 maids, 3 homes, kids, but he doesn't have a good marriage, he has nothing. The emphasis and the priority number 1 is always marriage. Since marriage, according to Judaism, is so important, since true love is spiritual, the rabbis tell us that when it comes to soulmates, Hashem gives you what you need, not what you want. We all want certain things when we're dating, but it's not necessarily what we need. If zivugim are min hashamayim, if zivugim are made in heaven, there's a reason for that, because only Hashem knows what we need, not what we want. And it's not a store where you go in and choose, I want vanilla ice cream, strawberry ice cream, or Napoleon, is that what they call it, or Napolitan? Strawberry, vanilla, and chocolate. Neapolitan? It's been a while. You don't get what you want. Hashem says, I know what you need, and that's more important. So sometimes, what happens years later down the road, we may be disappointed, we may be unhappy about something that we don't like. Let's remember, the marriage was made in heaven, he or she has something that I need. And isn't that more important than anything else? Even though I've spoken about spiritual attraction, and a spiritual goal and spiritual love, there is some importance to physical attraction too. We don't minimize physical attraction. The fact that there is something called a physical attraction is there for a reason. That is our way of being able to detect if there is any chemistry to begin with. We don't have to live with someone that we're not attracted to. We have to feel good about the relationship. So the physical attraction is not there to mislead us. It's there to help us. Similar backgrounds, similar outlooks, good chemistry. That is the foundation. So obviously there needs to be some physical attraction. You have to feel good. And that is a tool to help you make a decision if you feel comfortable with this or not. But the problem is many people make that the ikar and the rest is the tafel. Everything else is not as important, and that's the most important. If people confuse the two, the physical and the spiritual, and give more importance to the physical, then their yachas, their attitude towards the spiritual, will be minimal, will be unimportant. And when the physical dissipates over time and with age, he might decide it's time to find another spouse, another mate. So what do we do with the marriage that started off on the right track? There was love, there was respect, and after a while, either one or the two of them cannot take each other. Why? Because apparently there's some personality clashes, or the wife sees that her husband is just so full of hisranot. He has so many weaknesses. And she's having a hard time dealing with it. And she knows nobody's perfect, but she's simply having a hard time with his weaknesses. What should she do? Should she just ask for a divorce? She can't get along with him. He's tough. He's hard to live with. She recognizes that he has some good points too, but he has too many weaknesses. What should she do? There's a famous saying in several languages. I know in Portuguese they say it, in Italian they have it, and I think even in English. Who is a true friend? Anybody know what the answer to that is? A true friend is one who loves you with all your weaknesses. If one recognizes that you have weaknesses and he still loves you despite the weaknesses, he's a true friend, because we all have weaknesses. As long as he doesn't continuously and repeatedly point them out to you. He or she's willing to overlook it. So a true friend knows your weaknesses and is willing to accept them. If there was a true friendship, a true love, a good relationship from the very start, those weaknesses were there, they really didn't develop. We don't really change that much in life. There may be more tension, there may be more problems, the kids come along and our attention is split. Obviously there are many things that take from our time, but human nature hasn't really changed, hasn't been transformed here, just because of the marriage. So if you liked her, if you liked him, once upon a time, you were willing to overlook those weaknesses, why can't you continue to live with those weaknesses? If you really care for someone, then you're willing to live with it and perhaps help him or her. That's why you are there to begin with. The Torah calls you an Ezer Kenegdo. Hashem placed you there because you are the best person to help him or her with those problems. We talk about regular problems, not major problems, where one may need outside help. What happens if we're not dealing with weaknesses, but the love really disappeared completely? They have no more feelings for each other. That happens all the time. They reach the point where they come to the marriage counselor after 18 years. They've been fighting so much, they should have gone earlier, and now the love is completely gone. How is that marriage counselor supposed to bring those two together? They claim that the love is gone. Is the love really gone? According to some Sepharim that I've read, it says love really is never completely gone. It is just buried with all the chaos, with all the anger, the insults, and the hard feelings that one has had to endure for so many years. So it's still there, but it's completely buried. And what do you do to your Hanukkah, to your silver candelabra or Hanukkah that is a little tarnished? You simply rub off the yellow, you polish it, and it's shining once again. It is possible, whatever Rabbi, I assure you, it is still possible to polish a relationship, because the love is not completely gone. It's only buried for so many years. It may be hard to bring it back, but it is possible. I always like to quote a license plate that I've seen once, the back of a car. Just remember, in this world, God allows U-turns. The police may not allow the U-turn, the signs may not allow for a U-turn, but Hashem allows for a U-turn. That's what Teshuvah is all about. We can change. We can change our ways. Our nature is very difficult to change, but you can change your ways. Even if a marriage has deteriorated, it is still possible to salvage. One should never give up hope. And because Hashem very much believes in salvaging a marriage, what has Hashem done that is very, very surprising? Anybody know? In order to save a marriage, Hashem is willing that his name be erased. When it comes to the episode of Sotah in the Torah, where a woman is suspected of betraying the trust of her husband, of having an affair, Hashem says, let my name be erased in those waters. Let her drink from it. Because if in fact she did something, she will die. But if not, let the husband feel secure that his wife still likes him, still cares about him, and did not go against him. Hashem says, let my name be erased in those waters. Most difficult situations to improve, because we can all make a U-turn. One of the most important steps that the two need to take, if they reach the point where they both think it's a point of no return, is to express a sincere desire of succeeding. If one says, I'm not interested in this anymore, I don't mind if this fails and falls apart, that's bad. if you do say we want to succeed, and I think everybody starts off underneath the chuppah with that desire of wanting to succeed. Nobody wants to fail. So if at all times the two really want to succeed, it is possible to work with them. Because after all, anybody that gets a divorce, not in all situations, as we will see soon, there are some times that a divorce is the only option out. But any time there has been a divorce in a marriage, regardless of whose fault it is, the two have failed. Imagine losing a soccer match, especially if it's the championship. The terrible feeling, the shame, all the effort, the time, the money that went into training, and losing the match, not being able to hold and pick up that golden trophy, even though for us, it's nonsense. But it's very similar to marriage. Marriage is really a golden trophy that you can pick up and hold on to. It really should mean a lot, and everybody should want to win the game. And whoever does not really failed, and that's a terrible feeling that we want to avoid at all costs. But besides failure, as was mentioned earlier by Rabbi Rubinstein, one of the worst parts of it all is that there is a tremendous loss. And whose loss is it? The children. The children are the ones that lose out the most. Because the man or woman may remarry, may be happy. Perhaps it happens that sometimes second marriages are better than the first. It's a possibility. But in the majority of the cases, the kids, especially if they were young, they suffer. Another reason why we want to avoid divorce at all costs. In the prayer, the tefillah, we ask Hashem, you know what, Hashem? We have sinned, and maybe we don't deserve the Geulah, the redemption of Mashiach. Therefore, aseh lema'ancha velo lema'anenu. Do it for your sake. Bring us back to Eretz Israel, bring us Mashiach, in order that your name should be sanctified. Forget about us. Do it for yourself, Hashem. In the same way one should look at divorce. Do it for your kids. In other words, don't get divorced. Don't think about yourself. Well, I'm going to be happier perhaps if I remarry. Perhaps do it for your kids. Don't you care about them? Rabbis tell us in the Gemara, whoever does end up divorcing his first wife, Zivug Rishon, the one who he had a good relationship with, the mother of his children, afilu mizbeach morid alav dmaot. Even the altar sheds tears. Does anybody know why? What does the altar shedding tears have to do with the divorce? There are various interpretations. I saw one that says as follows. What is an altar for? La'akriv korbanot, to bring sacrifices. If a marriage ends up in divorce, it's because one or the two of them did not want to sacrifice for the other. And sometimes that's what's necessary to maintain the marriage. Therefore, even the altar sheds tears. I accept all the sacrifices on the altar. Why weren't these two able to sacrifice just a little bit? And the reason for that is selfishness, as was mentioned earlier. One does not want to sacrifice. It's a small sacrifice. It can only be selfishness. So when do two people divorce? When can they divorce? When should they divorce? Torah says that they can get divorced. We're not Catholics. We allow for divorce. Divorce sometimes is the right thing to do. But the rabbi is limited, especially if it's a zivug rishon, if it's the first marriage where there are children involved. The rabbis advise us divorce should only come about either shaya po ervat davar, either there was a case of adultery or something similar to that, where the trust has been betrayed. It's permissible, and sometimes you need to do that. You have no choice in the matter, depending on how serious it is, depending what happened. If the wife or the husband are doing things that are totally incompatible with the Torah, these could be a cause for divorce. If it's a zivug sheni, if it's a second marriage or a third marriage, then the requirements are not as strict, even if you just don't like her anymore. But if it's the first marriage, the zivug rishon, you've had a good relationship, kids are there, be careful not to divorce for just any reason. What I tell people before they seriously consider divorce is to ask yourself two questions. Question number one, Is there a good reason that's acceptable to many people? People would agree that this is a good, valid reason. And number two, even if you have a good reason, is that the advisable thing to do? Sometimes you may have a good reason, but is it really advisable? Where you're going to be by yourself, locked up in a house, and many women end up not remarrying and staying single for the rest of their life. Is that what you want to do? If things have reached that point where one says, you know what, I'd rather be alone and not married to this man, then things are really bad. I think at that point, the two need outside help. If one says, I'd rather stay alone, most people say, maybe I'll do better the next time around. But if one has reached the point that, you know what, if I don't find anyone, I'd rather stay by myself, that's a very critical situation. What should one do? If things have gotten out of hand, things have deteriorated, and he's almost ready to give up hope, what's the first thing that he or she should do? Anybody want to suggest? Anybody who's been here in the previous segment perhaps has a clue. What is the first thing that one can try to salvage the marriage? The first thing that should be attempted is to examine one's deeds. The rabbis tell us, Ish ve'isha zahu shechina b'nehem. If the two merit it, the two are behaving themselves, the Shekhinah is with them. If the Shekhinah is with the couple, they'll do well. Everything will be okay. The Shekhinah is there. The Shekhinah is present. In lo zahu, esh ochaltam. A fire will consume Halila, the house. The Shekhinah does not want to be there. There's something wrong. As I mentioned last week, sometimes HaKadosh Baruch Hu uses the woman kenegdo as a whip. The husband is surprised. She was so nice to me all these years. Now she's opposed to me in everything I do. Examine yourself. Maybe you're doing something against the Torah, and Hashem is using her as a whip against you. So when something is getting out of hand, most of us run to check the mezuzah. Maybe the mezuzah is no good. There's been a break-in. So we check the mezuzah. Sometimes that's okay to do. That may be a problem. But when it comes to the relationship of a husband and wife, it's not the mezuzah. Check yourself first. Check your own ma'asim. How is your relationship with Hashem? Examine one's deeds is the first thing to do. Be careful with all competition. If there's a television at home, that's harmful. Throw it out. In the 60s and the 70s, if you had a television, you could maybe get away with it. What did we have in TV back then? The Three Stooges? Hogan's Heroes? Some documentaries? News? Today it's full of pornography and crime, and even the non-Jewish world admits that it takes a toll, psychologically, mentally, and emotionally, on children and on husbands and wives. They agree, the non-Jewish world agrees that this is dangerous stuff. Anybody who wants to have a healthy home, therefore, should throw away his television. I've spoken to Israelis who've turned off their radio for a week, and they felt so much better at the end of the week. Calm. Because what do you hear on the radio every day in Israel? Bad news. There is no good news. What do you see on TV? Terrible things. Completely unadvisable to have in one's home, even if you just take it out once in a while. There's just too many things that, as you're changing the channels, even the commercials are not clean. It's not the right thing to do. To see, to have it, or to go to movies. It destroys the relationship because it competes for your time, for your attention. Besides all the damage that it will cause you by seeing and hearing the things that you see and hear. Another good idea to do if things are very difficult, go for a walk. Go shopping together. I advise people to go away at least once or twice a year without the kids. Because by going away, you are getting away from your routine. You don't have to worry about bills. You're cutting down on the tension. Your wife doesn't have to wash the dishes and do the laundry and cook. I guarantee you that if you go away for a 3-day weekend, anywhere you choose, as long as it's a little far away from the city, you will see a remarkable change. All of a sudden you will say, oh, the last time I remember you this way was in our honeymoon. Well, when was your last honeymoon? You should have one every year. If the two are away on their own and they're still having a hard time getting along, That's not a good sign. If you're away on your own without the kids, without your bills, without the laundry, without your cell phone. By the way, shut the cell phone. If you're away from all of that and you're still arguing and bickering, there's something terribly wrong with the marriage. You need help. Another good tool that is always good to have at all times is communication. Rabbis tell us that the speech is something very powerful. One has to be careful with what he says. Once you've said it, you can't take it back. Koach hadibur kadosh nod, it's very holy. That is what distinguishes man from animal. We have the power to speak. Don't tell me about parrots that speak, because that's not true speech. We have the power of speech. And what is that power for? What was it given to us? To communicate. And if one continuously communicates, one is able to resolve many, many problems. Just a couple more ideas. Recently I was looking at the idea of Zachor v'Shamor on Shabbat. There's a certain significance on Shabbat of not only staying away from certain melachot, from certain actions and certain activities, but there's also the mitzvah of Zachor. It's Yom HaShabbat lekadesho, to sanctify. We make the kiddush. We say things to remember that this is Shabbat, and we keep away from doing certain things. So there is Zachor v'Shamor. They're both important. We don't read newspapers. We don't talk about our business. We sanctify the day by staying away from certain melachot, and by talking about the Shabbat, by singing, by making a kiddush. This is what brings about the true spirit of Shabbat. The same should be true in one's marriage. There should be a Zachor v'Shamor. Shamor, stay away from those things that create distance. There are certain no-nos that you can't do. Learn about them. And Zachor. Zachor means remind your wife how beautiful she is. Compliment her. Say things. Communicate. And even I had to learn this the hard way, of course. My wife would tell me, why don't you say something about this new dress I just bought? And I would say, well, if I don't say anything, it means I like it. You would hear about it if I didn't like it. He says, no. That's not the way it goes. I always want to hear, she tells me, that it's nice. And what she meant was, even if I don't like it, I should still say it's nice. Because whenever I try to be sincere and honest, I tell her, I don't think this is so good. She's already insulted. But I'm telling you the truth. She doesn't want to hear that. Because in her eyes, she made a good decision in buying what she bought. Whenever I would try, compliments don't cost money. They're very easy. It just takes a few seconds of our time. Say something nice. What else besides compliments doesn't cost money? A smile. The rabbis tell us, greet everybody with a smile. If you don't, he'll think you're cold and indifferent and you don't like him. And that's not true. You still may like him, but you simply are reserved and cold and not that you don't dislike him. But people judge you by the way you act, by the way you speak to them. You don't give somebody Shabbat Shalom here, they'll really feel bad. In New York, they don't care because nobody gives Shabbat Shalom there. But in LA, it's a smaller place. They expect you to say, hi, Shabbat Shalom. That's the way it is in a smaller place. Come home with a smile, because a smile is contagious. If you smile to them, they will smile back, hopefully. It also helps to bring down the tension. What if you want to give a rebuke? What if you want to reprimand? You want to reprimand your husband if he did something wrong, or you want to say something to your wife. You should know a very important rule when it comes to tochacha, giving musar. The only way your musar will be effective if there's no distance between you and the person you're giving musar. He or she has to be convinced that you mean their benefit. If there is already distance between the two of you, and you say musar, they won't listen. Preserve that closeness, because then you can really make a difference. The Torah says, give musar to your friend. Because you're so close to him, he will listen to you. A friend's advice, a friend's suggestion, a friend's rebuke is more powerful than 1,000 speeches from the rabbi. Because that individual may not have a relationship with the rabbi. But if a friend, a close friend, tells you that you're wrong, and you're close to him, he or she will listen. If there's no distance between the husband and wife, the chances for the rebuke, for the reprimand to work are greater. I'd like to just finish with the following important points. Let's not forget Even if the relationship is not doing so well, hazivug min hashamayim. Unless you were very picky, in most cases, Hashem put you together with that woman. Hashem put you together with that man. The zivug was made in heaven. Zivug min hashamayim. There's a reason for the two of you to be together. You're not necessarily going to do better if you go out with someone else. The Zohar says, a yonah, a dove, never leaves its partner. Le'olam, forever. That is the attitude that we should have towards marriage. If underneath the chuppah we were serious about succeeding, and we gave our wife that ring, and we showed commitment, and we meant it, then let it stay forever. Just like a dove wants to stay forever with its partner and not think of someone else, that is the way we should think of marriage. Ideally, this is meant to last forever. Last but not least, the reason why the two want to stay together is because of the following passage in Hazan. Lo matzah kadosh baruch hu keli mahzik bracha ela shalom. The best vessel to hold the blessing is shalom, is peace. Hashem says, I want to give you blessings. I want to bless this home. I want there to be happiness. I want you to create a vessel for me. And Hashem says, the best vessel to contain all these blessings is shalom. The couple therefore have so much to gain if they stay together. Bezrat Hashem, they will be blessed with beracha and shalom. Thank you very much.